In this video, we're going to look at the concept of multiplying and dividing fractions and mixed numbers. Let's look at the example below. We have half of a whole pie left, and we want to take 2/3 of the half to eat. What fraction of the entire whole pie would you take to eat? Well, what we're doing here is we're taking 2/3 of the half, and to do that we divide the half into 3 equal parts, and then we take 2 of those parts. And this amounts to 2/6 of a whole pie. And this example illustrates the fraction multiplication 1/2 times 2/3. We end up multiplying the denominators 2 times 3 to make smaller piece sizes, which are sixths, but we also end up multiplying the numerators to make more pieces, 2 times as many. So our answer is 1 times 2 over 2 times 3, or an answer of 2/6. And as you note, 2/6 here is 1/3 of a pie, and we also know that 2/6 reduces to 1/3. So out of this example, we get the rule to multiply fractions, multiply numerators together, and also multiply denominators together. Let's look at an example. Multiply 3/4 times 2/5. Here we multiply 3 times 2 to get 6 pieces. We multiply 4 times 5 to get 20, which means we're cutting our pieces into 20ths. So 20ths is the piece size, and 3 times 2 equals 6 pieces. Our result is 6/20ths, and we can reduce 6/20ths by dividing both 6 and 20 by 2 to get 3/10. In a second example, we have 2/3 times 3/4 times 6/8. We can extend the fraction multiplication method to 3 fractions or more if we want. We take all of the numerators and multiply them together. We take all of the denominators and multiply them together. We have 2 times 3 times 6 in the numerator and 3 times 4 times 8 in the denominator. We end up with 36 over 96. And we can reduce this all the way down to 3/8 by dividing both 36 and 96 by 12. In the previous two examples, we got results of 3/10 and 3/8 after reducing. Could we have reduced before doing any multiplying? The answer is yes. Let's look at the first example. We had 3/4 times 2/5. What we can do here is we can divide a factor of 2 out of 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. We can divide that same factor of 2 out of 2 to get 1. So then our fraction multiplication becomes 3/2 times 1/5. We then multiply these fractions together, 3 times 1 over 2 times 5, and we get an answer of 3/10, which was our reduced answer. In the second example, where 36/96 reduced to 3/8, we can do the same thing here. We look for factors that are common to both numerator and denominator. Factors of 3 divide into both 3 and 3, giving us a 1 and a 1. And we can divide a factor of 2 into 2, giving us a 1, and divide a factor of 2 into 4, giving us a 2. Now what we have is 1 over 1 times 1/2 times 6/8. Well, we can see some more common factors. 2 divides into 2 one time. 2 divides into 6 3 times. Now what we're left with is 1 over 1 times 1 over 1 times 3/8. There really is nothing left to multiply. We just get 3 over 8 after we multiply numerators and denominators together. And that's our reduced answer. We can't reduce it anymore. We've done all our reducing ahead of time. So to simplify fraction multiplication, you may divide common factors from any numerator and denominator, and then multiply what is left. In this example, we multiply 2/3 times 2/5 times 60/80ths, and we're going to do so by first canceling common factors. Okay, well, there's a lot of common factors here. Let's go for some of the bigger ones. 60 and 80 both share a common factor of 10. We divide 60 by 10 to get 6. We divide 80 by 10 to get 8. This leaves us with 2/3 times 2/5 times 6/8. We see that 6 and 8 both share a common factor of 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And this gives us 2/3 times 2/5 times 3/4. Well, remember, we can cancel factors out of any numerator and any denominator. 3 and 3 both share a common factor of 3. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 3 once. Also, 4 and 2 both share a common factor of 2. 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. Now what we're left with is 2 over 1 times 1 over 5 times 1 over 2, and we still can cancel out a factor of 2 out of the numerator 2 here and the denominator 2 there. And then all we're left with is 1 over 1 times 1/5 times 1 over 1, and that multiplies out to 1/5, our reduced answer. Now if we had not reduced ahead of time, we would have gotten an answer of 240 over 1200. And then we'd have to do all kinds of reducing to get that final answer of 1/5. Now let's look at an example with a variable in it. Remember, a variable is just a symbol or letter that stands for a real number. In this case, y is our variable. We have the fraction 2 over y times y over 4. I use the dot instead of the times sign just because we're working with variables, but the dot means multiply. Here, y and y share a common factor of y. Y divided by y is 1. Y divided by y is 1. Also, 2 and 4 share a common factor of 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So all we have left after we cancel is 1 over 1 times 1 over 2, and that multiplies out to 1/2. You can kind of see the value of canceling here. By canceling, we got rid of that algebraic variable. In Algebra 2, we're going to be multiplying fractions that are a lot more complicated than even this last example. Here's an example. X squared minus 4 over x squared minus 2x times x squared minus x over x squared plus 4x plus 4. In this example, we would have to completely factor all the numerators and denominators and then cancel out common factors, just like we've been doing. Okay, well, let's move on to multiplying mixed numbers. To multiply mixed numbers, convert the mixed numbers into fractions and then multiply the fractions. Then you can convert back to a mixed number if you want after you get your answer. Let's look at an example. Multiply 1/2 by 3 3/4. 1/2 is the improper fraction 3/2. Remember, we take the whole number times the denominator and add the numerator. 1 times 2 plus 1 is 3 over the denominator 2. 3 3/4 turns into 15/4. 3 times 4, 12, plus 3 is 15 over 4. Now we multiply these fractions. 3/2 times 15/4. There are no factors that can be divided out of both numerator and denominator here, so we just multiply these the way they are. 3 times 15 makes 45, and 2 times 4 makes 8. So our answer is 45/8. Well, we can convert this back to a mixed number by dividing out 45 by 8. 8 goes into 45 5 times with a remainder of 5, so our mixed number answer would be 5 5/8. Let's look at an example where we multiply a fraction by a whole number. 3/8 times the whole number 1600. Well, 1600 is our mixed number in this case, and we just write it as the fraction 1600 over 1. This results in the fraction multiplication 3/8 times 1600 over 1. We notice that both 1600 and 8 have a common factor of 8. 8 divides into 8 one time. 8 divides into 1600 200 times. This simplifies our problem to 3 over 1 times 200 over 1. And that results in 600 over 1 as our answer. And we can write that as the whole number 600. And as you can see, canceling ahead of time simplified this problem quite a bit. Now let's move on to dividing fractions and mixed numbers. Division of a number is defined as multiplication by the reciprocal of the number. For example, 8 divided by 2 equals 8 times a half. And we can apply this definition to dividing fractions as well. And the reciprocals consist of the fraction being turned upside down, or the term for it is inverted. To divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction you are dividing by. Here's an example where we divide 3/4 by 5/8. The first thing we do here is we invert the fraction 5/8, and we write it as 8/5 or times 8/5. So 3/4 divided by 5/8 equals 3/4 times 8/5. Now, after we write it as a multiply problem, we divide out common factors. 4 divides into 4 once. 4 divides into 8 twice. This gives us the problem 3/1 times 2/5, and this multiplies out to 6/5, or as a mixed number, 1 and 1/5. Let's look at an example where we divide a whole number by a fraction. 4 divided by 3/8. The first thing we do here is we rewrite that 4 as 4/1. So our problem is 4/1 divided by 3/8. Now we're tempted to cancel a 4 out of the 4 and 8, but you should not do this. You have to rewrite as a multiply problem first. We rewrite this as 4/1 times the reciprocal, which is 8/3. So our division problem turns into 4/1 times 8/3. And now we look for factors to cancel out, and there are none. So if we had canceled before, we would have made a mistake. What we have to do now is multiply 4 times 8 to get 32, and 1 times 3 to get 3. Our answer is 32/3, and we can write this as a mixed number, 10 and 2/3. Here's an important concept to cover before we do any additional problems. A fraction always represents division. We may always interpret a fraction as the division of the numerator by the denominator. For example, what division problem does the fraction 10/2 represent? Well, 10/2 equals 10 divided by 2, which is 5. In a second example, we have a fraction -30/5. Well, we can interpret this as -30 divided by 5. Remember, for dividing negative numbers, if you have one negative and one positive, you get a negative answer, and this results in an answer of -6. We're going to use this fact in the following problems. Now we're going to look at multiplying and dividing fractions, mixed numbers that have negatives in them. The rule of thumb here is just to ignore those negative signs, but apply the rule that if you have one negative, one positive, you get a negative answer, and if you have two negatives, you have a positive answer. So we do our fraction division and multiplication just like we did before, except keep that rule in mind. Our first example here is -2/11 divided by -3/8. We're going to divide that as if it was just +2/11 divided by +3/8, where we invert the fraction we're dividing by, but we keep the negative signs, -2/11 times -8/3. Now remember the rule for multiplying negatives. You have a negative times a negative, we get a positive answer. That means we can just drop those negative signs. Our answer is going to be positive. So then we end up multiplying the numerators, 2 times 8 over 11 times 3, and we get an answer of 16/33. Nothing could cancel out here. That's our answer, reduced. Nothing else can be divided out. In a second example, we're going to write the fraction -1/2 in two different ways. Well, -1/2 is a negative number. We can get -1/2 by taking -1/2. We also can get -1/2 by taking +1 over -2. All three of those amount to the same thing, -1/2. Let's look at the example where we divide out and simplify the fraction -1/2 over the second fraction -3/4. Remember I said a fraction implies division. Well, what we really have here is -1/2 divided by a second fraction, -3/4. Now first note that when we have -3/4, that's a division of two negative numbers. That means that fraction, -3/4, is really +3/4. So we can just drop those two negatives. Then we rewrite as a multiply problem. -1/2 times the reciprocal of 3/4, which is 4/3. Now we can do a little bit of canceling. 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. We still have that one negative sign. I'm just going to put that one negative sign on the outside. and then do our multiplication of the numerators. 1 times 2 over 1 times 3. We have a negative sign on the outside, and our answer is negative 2/3. In a second example, multiply out a over 3 quantities squared. We're squaring a fraction, which means we multiply a over 3 times itself. And to do this multiplication, we multiply numerators. In this case, it's a times a, where a is a variable, over 3 times 3. We can write a times a as a squared, and 3 times 3 is 9. So our answer is a squared over 9. In the last example, we're going to divide two mixed numbers. 3 and 2/11 divided by 5 and 1/8, and we'll simplify. Our first job here is to convert both mixed numbers into improper fractions. 3 and 2/11 is 3 times 11 plus 2, or 35 over 11. 5 and 1/8 is 5 times 8, 40, plus 1 is 41 over 8. So our division problem is 35/11 divided by 41/8. Don't do any canceling yet. First invert and write as a multiply problem. We rewrite this as 35/11 times 8/41, and now we can cancel if we can, but there are no common factors, so we just have to multiply this out as it is. 35 times 8, if you multiply that out, you'll get 280, and 11 times 41, if you multiply that out, you will get 451. And you can't reduce this anymore. If we could have canceled beforehand. So our final answer is 280 over 451.